On the morning of Friday, October the 13th, 1307, across the entire Kingdom of France, soldiers acting on sealed orders received simultaneously began arresting members of a single organization. The arrests were coordinated with a precision extraordinary for the medieval period. Hundreds of locations, hundreds of targets, acted upon at the same moment to prevent any warning from spreading. The men arrested were not criminals, rebels, or enemies of the state in any conventional sense. They were members of one of the most powerful institutions in Christendom, the Knights Templar. By nightfall, virtually the entire French leadership of the Order of the Temple was in custody. The interrogations that followed, conducted under torture, would produce confessions of heresy so lurid and so implausible that historians still debate whether the men who gave them were describing actual practices or simply saying whatever their interrogators needed to hear. The charge was manufactured. The motive was financial. And the event of that Friday, the 13th, set in motion a series of consequences, including, possibly, the permanent association of that date with misfortune, that echo forward to the present. To understand what the Knights Templar actually were, it is necessary to set aside the mythology that has accumulated around them and examine the organization in operational terms. The Order of the Temple was founded in approximately 1119, in the aftermath of the First Crusade. Its original mission was military and religious, a monastic order whose members took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but were trained warriors rather than contemplative monks. Their stated purpose was to protect Christian pilgrims making the dangerous journey to Jerusalem and the Holy Land. The protection mission gave the Templars a geographic problem that they solved with extraordinary ingenuity, and in solving it, accidentally invented something that had never existed before at any comparable scale. A pilgrim traveling from Paris to Jerusalem in the 12th century faced a journey of many months across territories with varying degrees of safety and legal protection. Carrying enough gold and silver for the entire journey was dangerous. Robbery was common, roads were unsafe, and even legitimate taxation by local lords could strip a traveler of resources. The Templar solution was a system of letters of credit. A pilgrim could deposit funds at a Templar commandery in Paris, receive a coded letter representing that value, travel to Jerusalem, and present the letter at the Templar commandery there to withdraw the equivalent funds. The letter was useless to a thief who didn't know the cipher. The underlying value stayed in the Templar treasury. The pilgrim traveled with paper instead of gold. This is recognizable to a modern reader as banking. It is not merely similar to modern banking in a metaphorical sense. It is functionally identical to the core mechanism of a letter of credit, which remains a fundamental instrument in international trade finance to this day. The Templars didn't intend to invent banking. They intended to solve a logistics problem. The banking emerged from the solution. From the letter of credit, the Templars' financial operations expanded organically in every direction that power and necessity suggested. They made loans to kings. European monarchs in the 12th and 13th centuries required capital for wars, for crusades, for the ordinary expenses of governance in an era before systematic taxation. The Templars, with their network of commanderies across Europe and the Levant, their accumulated deposits from pilgrims and donors, and their reputation for institutional reliability, were the obvious lender of choice. They held collateral. They charged what they described as not interest, but administrative fees, navigating the same church prohibition on usury that would later require the Medici to invent their own semantic workaround. They managed the treasury of the French crown at various points, holding royal funds and managing disbursements with an efficiency that the royal bureaucracy of the period could not match. The Paris Temple, the Templars' headquarters in France, a fortress-like compound in the center of the city, functioned as the effective center of French royal finance for significant periods of the 13th century. They accumulated land. Through donations from pious noblemen who wished to support the crusading mission, bequests from dying patrons, and strategic purchases, the Templars became one of the largest landowners in Europe. Their agricultural operations produced income. Their mills and farms generated surplus. Their network of commanderies, Fortified agricultural and administrative centers scattered across France, England, the Iberian Peninsula, Germany, and Italy constituted an economic infrastructure of genuinely continental scale. At their peak, the Knights Templar were not merely a military order with banking sidelines. They were a multinational organization managing capital flows across an entire continent, with operational reach in North Africa and the Middle East, answerable only to the Pope, exempt from local taxation and local legal jurisdiction, and possessed of wealth that exceeded that of many European kingdoms. Philip IV of France, known to history as Philip the Fair, a description of his appearance rather than his character, came to the throne in 1285. He was a capable and ruthless monarch, consumed by ambitions of French consolidation and expansion that required constant, expensive military campaigning. By the first decade of the 1400s, Philip was deeply, dangerously indebted. He had already expelled the Jews from France and seized their assets. He had expelled the Lombard bankers, Italian financiers operating in France, and taken their deposits. He had debased the French currency multiple times, earning him the nickname the counterfeiter from an outraged pope. None of these measures had been sufficient. The Templars held significant claims against the French crown. They were, in operational terms, one of Philip's primary creditors, and they held these claims from a position of institutional invulnerability that was deeply aggravating to a king who viewed all power within his kingdom as properly his. The Templars answered to the Pope, not to Philip. Their properties were legally outside French royal jurisdiction. Their members were subject to church courts, not French courts. Philip could not simply expropriate them without legal cover. The institutional legitimacy of his kingdom depended on at least the appearance of adherence to law and church authority. He needed a charge. The accusation Philip constructed through his chief minister Guillaume de Nogaret and a network of informants and collaborators within the Templar order was heresy. The specific charges included the denial of Christ during initiation ceremonies, requiring initiates to spit on the cross, the worship of a mysterious idol called Baphomet, sodomy, obscene kisses, and the practice of an illicit absolution right by non-clerical officers. These charges were, individually and collectively, precisely calibrated to be maximally shocking to a medieval Christian audience and maximally difficult to disprove by an accused party with no recourse to independent legal process. The confessions obtained under torture were extensive and detailed. They were also almost certainly largely or entirely false. The Templar initiation ceremony, as best as historians can reconstruct it from non-coerced sources, was a conventional Christian religious rite. There is no credible archaeological or documentary evidence for any of the specific practices alleged. The confessions follow patterns typical of torture-produced testimony. They replicate the categories suggested by the interrogators. They're internally inconsistent in details, and many were recanted when the accused found the opportunity to do so before papal investigators. Pope Clement, French Pope, elected in part through Philip's political influence, was placed in an impossible position. He had his own doubts about the legitimacy of the proceedings. Papal commissions established to investigate the charges found the evidence inconclusive or worse. But Clement was dependent on Philip's political support and lacked the institutional strength to withstand sustained royal pressure. The order was formally suppressed by papal decree at the Council of Vienne in 1312. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, recanted his confession in front of a public gathering in Paris in 1314 and was burned at the stake the same day. The financial outcome for Philip was less clean than he had hoped. The Templars' assets were officially transferred not to the French crown, but to the Knights Hospitaller, a rival military order. Philip pressured and maneuvered to extract as much as he could from this arrangement, and did receive significant compensation for what he framed as the administrative costs of the suppression. But a substantial portion of the Templar wealth remained in Hospitaller hands or was simply dissipated in the chaos of the dissolution. Many individual Templars who recanted their confessions were released after performing penances. A significant number escaped, to Scotland, to Portugal, to territories outside French reach, before or during the arrests. Portugal, notably, simply renamed its Templar organization the Order of Christ and continued operating under royal protection. Vasco da Gama, who opened the sea route to India nearly 2 centuries later, sailed under the Red Cross of the Order of Christ. The financial system the Templars had built, the letters of credit, the network of depositories, the capital management infrastructure, did not disappear with the order. The mechanisms were too useful. They were absorbed by the Italian banking houses that had been developing parallel systems for decades, and it is through those Italian banks, the Bardi, the Peruzzi, the Medici, that the financial technologies pioneered by the Templars entered the mainstream of European economic development. Friday the 13th. The connection between that date and misfortune is culturally robust and genuinely difficult to trace with precision. The arrests of October 13th, 1307 fall on a Friday. Medieval Christian tradition already associated both Friday, the day of the crucifixion, and the number 13 with bad luck independently. Whether the Templar arrest specifically crystallized the combined association, or whether the superstition existed independently and the Templar date is coincidental, is an open historical question that scholars have not conclusively resolved. What is certain is that Philip the Fair destroyed the most sophisticated financial institution in medieval Europe in order to escape his debts, that the charges he used were almost certainly fabricated, and that the men who died for those charges, from Jacques de Molay on his burning pyre to the rank and file members who died in prison, were the first major victims of an old and durable technique, using the machinery of law and religion to accomplish what naked power alone cannot. Philip died 7 months after de Molay. All 3 of his sons died within 14 years, the dynasty ending with them. Whether this is cause and effect or coincidence is a matter of perspective. De Molay, according to chroniclers, cursed the king and the pope from the flames. Clement V died within a month of the execution, Philip within 7. History does not record whether they found this meaningful.